you, I would like you to be honest, and now in the chat, tell me who has read the chapters you were supposed to read and attempted the guiding questions. Can you please write that in the chat? María Gracia, Lourdes, okay. Catherine. Okay. So let's see, Lourdes. Which of the articles we read before, either Universal Grammar and the Teaching and Learning of Second Languages or How Do We Learn Grammar, resembles how language works the most? Or in which aspects? Have you detected any topic, any aspect you could say we had already talked about? Or any of the others?
Yes, I read that it has to do with the, I think it's quirk, I think.
Wittgenstein's article, yes. For example, which aspect have you detected as repeated, let's say?
The parameters, I think.
No, but Wittgenstein, in the article by Wittgenstein, they don't speak about the theory of principles and parameters as such. They do speak about universal grammar or an innate grammar, which is connected to the theory, the syntactic theory of principles and parameters, but it's not exactly the same. Okay.
Yes.
Good. Any other aspect any of you have detected? For example, Pinker works with a very, very famous sentence, if we can call it a sentence, by Chomsky, to illustrate the importance, let's say, to illustrate what we mean by this built-in grammar and the importance of syntax. And the sentence is on page of the original article 94. I think they mentioned it before. Yes, as from 92 or 93. And the sentence is, colorless green ideas ran furiously. Sophie, can you write it in the chat? Colorless, meaning with no color, colorless green ideas ran in the past, ran furiously.
Can you double check just to make sure?
Colorless green ideas ran furiously. Well, that's a very, very I'm sure that if you have never heard of it before, well, you will start coming across it whenever you read about linguistics, generative linguistics, or generative grammar. Now, what is it that this sentence illustrates connected to what we have been speaking about?
I think it reminded me of the use of nonsense.
Exactly. Excellent. It's very similar to the example work gives and the one, remember, we were working with last class, something like plomb the reed or plomb the Englishly, I don't remember, the reed, whatever. And remember that there were two strings of words, and one of them was less nonsensical or made more sense than the other one, which was
Una pregunta, ¿se tildó?
Sí, ahí dijo que se le cortó la luz.
Ah, ok.
Ahí veo.
Pensé que era yo. Gracias.
Yo también pensé que era yo.
Pero después vi que te estabas moviendo, Sofi, y dije, bueno.
Ahí va a probar entrar desde el celular a ver si puede.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Well, I'm here from the mobile phone. Well, this is incredible. I have never had problems, and now it's the second class we've had problems. So we'll try and move fast. I hope the power comes back. Sophie, have you shared the guiding questions so that I concentrate on some of them?
Not yet. What text would you like me to start with?
First, I will be starting with how language works. I was speaking about colorless green ideas ran furiously. And the purpose of that is to show that knowledge of language, one of the concepts, or one of the ideas that Pinker holds, is that generative grammar implies a discrete combinatorial system, a finite, let's say, system of elements, finite, limited, because it's a limited number of words, which could be verbs, nouns, adjectives, prepositions, whatever, can produce an infinite number of sentences. That's why generative grammar is called like that, generative. It's like the creative aspect of grammar, this capacity of producing an infinite number of sentences with a limited number of elements. That's the definition of a discrete combinatorial system that produces an infinite number of sentences. This has as a consequence, Pinker says in chapter 4, the interpretation that language is vast. He speaks of the vastness of language, that is to say, again, infinite, and also that this code, this grammatical code, which is the syntax we are born with, is autonomous from cognition. What do we understand by that? Autonomous from cognition. Independent from knowledge you have to study. So, for example, thanks to that, thanks to this innate knowledge of basic grammar, any native speaker, as we said last class, and this is what I was trying to make you say, this is what Randolph, Quirk, and Einstein hold in their article. Any native speaker can judge a sentence as grammatical or ungrammatical. Now, the sentences we analyzed last class in Quirk's Einstein's chapter showed the very first ones were English-like sentences, but you all agree that it was an invented language. Anyway, it sounded English-like because of the inflections, because of the morphology, because of certain auxiliary verbs or articles, that is to say, structural words that had been included. Now, there was one sentence that had no grammar, that had no syntax, no logical syntax, and it was very difficult to read. So that string of words had to be read as if you were reading a list of words. But then there was another one which you all recognized as an example of language. We couldn't understand the meaning of the words, but we could find some sense in it, because as speakers of a human language and of English, we could detect a logical order. So what is it that we learn, or what is it that we know when we acquire our mother tongue, according to the theory of universal grammar and the theory of syntax of principles and parameters. We know how to organize constituents in a sentence. We know how each word, not the meanings of words, we don't know the meanings of words, but we learn the categories. So we know intuitively, that's why Pinker also speaks about this instinct, this language instinct. We know that this word is a noun, and that nouns are modified by adjectives, and that verbs are followed by objects if they are transitive or not, or they are preceded by participants which do the work of agents of a sentence or not. Okay, so again, all this chapter 4, goes back over and over again to this very important notion of the difference between a grammatical and an ungrammatical sentence. And the fact that grammaticality, knowledge of syntax, this innate knowledge is autonomous, independent from cognition. Colorless green ideas sleep furiously is ridiculous, nonsensical, incoherent from the point of view of meaning, but it is a grammatical sentence. Do you agree with me that it is a grammatical sentence, or do you understand what I mean by saying this is a grammatical sentence? I don't know if they are answering in the chat. Ah, yes.
Yes.
Okay, I'm struggling here with my mobile phone. Can you hear me well? Yes?
Yes.
Okay. Well, the second, that goes, let me see if I can have the questions here on how language works. I have already explained that. Let me see. Well, then, we advise you not to pay attention to the word chain devices. Let's say what Pinker tries to explain is these, let's say, engineering-like languages, automatic languages. Nowadays, there are more and more, and they say that it cannot be compared to human languages because the production of sentences is not infinite but limited. So the example he gives is when you get a recording on the phone that will give you numbers as an answer to something, or when you get all those machines that answer when you contact the bank or any other institution, and they will give you an answer based on a limited number of elements, discrete combinatorial system, yes, like human languages, but the result, the number of sentences or phrases they can produce will be limited because there's no real grammar behind, okay? Well, then I advise you to go to read in detail in chapter 4 pages of the original article, 110, 111, and 112. On page 112, there's a very nice description and definition of the principles and parameters theory again. So I think it's worth reading so that you can really, let's say, get immersed in this new theory. Now I asked one of the questions I think I asked in the guiding questions, which I cannot see well now in the phone, and since I don't have power, I cannot see open my PC. But one of the questions is which word Pinker uses that would be and as a synonym of principles. Principles. You're trying to make it bigger. It's at the very end, I think. Yes. Let's see if it says, by the end of the paragraph, he provides a simple short definition of parameter. Before that, let's say, Pinker mentions the X-bar principle along with the value of parameters. Yeah, wait. Yes, there's someone said something in the chat. Can you read it for me?
Yes, here Lourdes says the another super rules.
I cannot hear. What?
Lourdes Lopez asks the unordered super rules.
I cannot hear well. I'm sorry. Well, anyway, the last part of questions, it's I want you to go over them and connect them with our next topic. The theory of predicates and arguments, because the X-bar principle is very much connected to that. So the X-bar principle is a syntactic principle because it has to do with syntax, with word order, with order of constituents, and that is connected to our next topic, the fact that a verb as the main or the central word or item in a sentence will, depending on the nature of that verb, you will know how many arguments are required by it. So how many elements, if any, need to be present in that sentence to be grammatical. So that is connected to the X-bar principle. Just to give a quick idea, for example, if you have the verb give, if you hear something like she gave, without my saying anything else, you know as native speakers that there are certain arguments that will be required, that are necessary, so that the sentence is grammatical. How many arguments? If I said something like she gave,
Three arguments, could it be? You give something.
which, let's see, Karen.
I mean, you give something to somebody. So 3 arguments, could it be?
Yes, and why 3 and not 2?
Because the verb is a transitive verb that requires a direct object and an indirect object, could it be?
Those are 2, and which is the third one?
The subject pronoun, or the doer of the
Exactly.
action.
Excellent. And this is what, for all those of you who are doing the subject for the first time, or who are studying about the theory of predicates and arguments for the first time, this is one of the big differences with traditional grammar, which is what you have been studying so far. In first year, when we do what we call patterns, which is precisely this, we are dealing with patterns, with the X-bar principle in a way, we speak of give as a ditransitive verb, ditransitive, that requires a direct object and an indirect object. And we don't think of the subject as another argument, but the subject is always the external argument. So whenever a verb requires a subject, we already say it's a one-place predicate because it requires an argument. In this case, in the case of the verb give, it requires 3 because you give something. If I say I gave money, the information is incomplete, even if it is out of context, isn't it? Because you expect to whom I gave money. Well, you expect to whom. So I gave money to the poor, for example, right? And so that would be the indirect object. And in that case, we have the third argument, okay? But I would like you again to go over those questions and the section where the author speaks about them so that you can make the connection with the next topic, okay? Well, finally, there's another question I would like someone to answer now. That is a question about nouny, about nouns and nouny things. I don't know if you can scroll down to see if I see it and if I have any volunteers saying anything about that. Okay, who has a powerful voice and can read in a very loud voice so that I can hear you well? Because with a mobile phone, I don't have the best conditions. So number 5, where it says later on page 25, who can read that in a loud voice? Luciano, can you?
Yeah, sure.
Try to speak up. Thank you.
Later on page 28, Pinker discusses phrase structure and he says, a part of speech then is not a kind of meaning. It is a kind of token that obeys certain formal rules, like a chess piece or a poker chip. A noun, for example, is a simply word that does nouny things. Explain what you understand. Okay.
Explain what you understand by a noun does nouny things. Luciano, do you dare? What do you understand by a noun does nouny things? Or a noun is like a token, a piece in a game, like a game of chess. What do you understand by that?
Well, what I understand is that it does not only name things, but it represents more than that. It's like, well, look for the definition of token is it's like a symbol, something that represents something. So it obeys.
Representing something. It's performing something. So what kind of nouny things can a noun do?
They obey certain rules, like they have an article before them.
For example, remember the example we analyzed last class, the one Querkenstein gave? There was the noun writ, unglashable in the writ. Do you remember?
Yes.
So the writ is an invention, but we all knew it was a noun because it was doing nouny things. For example, it was being the head of what could be a noun phrase, and we knew it was the head because, as you are very well saying, Luciano, it was preceded by a determiner, the writ, right?
Yes.
And that made sense. Now, in the case of the example Chomsky gives, colorless green ideas sleep furiously, it's completely incoherent from the point of view of meaning or what they symbolize, because ideas, you would never say that ideas have a color, that they can be green, and you would never say that a color is colorless, because that's a contradiction. But what you do know, and that's why this makes sense, grammatically speaking, it makes sense from the syntactic point of view, is that we don't know the meaning of the words, or we are not paying attention to the meaning of the words, but we are paying attention to the category of the words and the function that category can perform. These nouny things, which is an invention, things typical of a noun, being the head of a noun phrase, being the participant, that is the syntactic subject in a sentence, having the capacity of being pre-modified by qualities, by adjectives, or by determiners or numerals, and followed by a verb which will predicate something about them. What is it that colorless green ideas do? You expect them to do something or to be under certain state. So they sleep. And then, of course, from the point of view of logics, I mean, this is ridiculous, but grammatically it is not, right? So this is the grammar we are born with. So any native speaker, any human being is born knowing, having the capacity of knowing what, when a word is a noun and does nouny things, when a word is an adverb and does adverb-like things, when a word is a verb and does verb-like things, without going to school. When we go to school and they start describing that for us, and if it's prescriptive grammar, it's even worse because they give us rules and this is the name and this is what you should do or not. It's a headache and we don't like that. We need to know that. What for? Well, when you are at school, because being able to describe a language will help you understand and use the language in a better way, but up to a certain extent, right? So we must admit that we didn't study prescriptive grammar. We didn't study rules in order to speak well. Well, is this clear? I think we have gone over and over again this concept of what innate grammar is or built-in grammar is, that is totally connected to syntax. That's why the theory of principles and parameters is the theory of syntax that has to do with the order of constituents, the category of words, and how they combine, and that it belongs in generative grammar, which holds that any human being can produce an infinite number of sentences from a finite number of elements. Is that clear? Is there any other question you would like to ask me? Are there any questions? This is what you have to remember. I mean, there are many things you have to go back and read. I am going to be working with you with some multiple choice and true and false sentences we have uploaded, which are the type of exercises or questions we give to alumnos libres in final exams, and they are also going to be included in the first part of parciales. So in order to be able to answer those questions, you have to read all the articles in detail 3-4 times. But forever, for your whole life, I want you to know and to have very clear in mind what universal grammar is, what built-in grammar is, which is different from the grammar we study at school. That is forever, and I think it's very useful. And I think it's very nice, important, and a novelty if you want. You will tell me if I am right or not. I mean, these exercises of identifying crazy, incoherent words, or even invented words, made up words that are not, that form part of a sentence, let's say, that is grammatical. That you should remember forever, and that is very important if you want to produce translations or texts which really make sense. Well, is that clear? Can we move on to the Tower of Babel? And I still have no power. Oh God. Okay, let's go to the Tower of Babel or Babel and the other questions. I'm going to concentrate on question number 2, which has to do with the list of, not the one about the Bible, because we said something about it last class, but number 2. Who can read it in a very loud voice for me? What do the bullet points? Any volunteer with a powerful voice? No sé por qué se me oye tan bajo acá en este teléfono. A ver. No.
Te escucha bien, profe, igual. Va, yo te escucho bien.
Okay, can you read?
Okay. Number 2. What do the 6 bullet points listed right after this paragraph illustrate? Later on, page 9, Pinker reexamines the 6 topics listed. Why? What does he want to
Resumes.
do?
I think it's resumes. That means he goes back to them. Okay.
Here it says reexamines. Okay.
Reexamines. I thought you were misreading. Yeah, reexamines. That's okay. That's okay. I'm sorry. Go on. So, and why does he do so?
I think that Pinker wants to show which the features typical of English are.
Of English and of, yeah, first of English, and then when he re-examines them,
yes,
he also speaks about other languages. So the point here is the following. Remember that Chomsky said, and we analyzed that quote, that aside from their vocabulary, Earthlings speak a single language, the same language. And he was only thinking about syntax. Now you understand syntax very well, don't you? What I mean when I say syntax? Do you understand that? Okay.
Yes.
Well, yes, you do. But Pinker says, Pinker agrees with him, but at the same time, he points out that languages can differ from each other in unpredictable and in many ways. That it's not only as regards syntax that they differ as regards other things, right? For example, languages can be isolating languages. And in this first list of features, he speaks about isolating languages. So what he's really speaking about here is what we call language typologies. So apart from syntax, there are other features that are repeated or are repeated in different languages or are common to some languages and not to other languages, right? Well, so for example, one has to do with inflections. So you know that when we study grammar, we study syntax and morphology. You know what syntax is now? Morphology has to do with the morphology of words that has to do with the root of a word and whether the word has a prefix or a suffix, whether the word is going to be inflected in the case of a noun, which does nouny things, the inflections you are going to add to a word, the expected inflections in any language will be to tell us what about the noun? Can you tell me? So you are going to study a language which is not English. You're going to study Italian, as we said, Russian or whatever. You expect nouns, maybe, to be inflected, to have inflections, to show whether the noun is what. What grammatical aspect can an inflection show?
If it's singular or plural.
If it is singular or plural, excellent. What else?
Gender.
Estoy viendo si volvió la luz, chicos, pero no. Ah, parece que volvió la luz. Bueno, sigo con el teléfono y después me trato de conectar. So, if it is singular or plural, what else did you say?
Gender.
Gender, for example, if they are marked for gender. What about English? English nouns. There's no grammatical gender in English, and very few nouns are marked for gender, very few. For example, which ones?
God and
Which
goddess.
ones are marked for gender?
God and goddess could be.
For example, God, goddess, actor, actress, widow and widower. But in general, they are not marked for gender. So there's no grammatical gender. Now, are they marked? Are there inflections for number in English? Are there inflections for number?
Yes.
Yes, of course. And which are the options? So we expect a language universal, which is not a principle. We expect that we are going to speak about a noun in which two options? What is it that we expect? That a noun could be what as regards number? Either singular or
Plural.
singular or plural. But for example, in Russian, it could be singular, dual, or plural. So depending on whether there are 1, 2, or 3 elements of one kind, the inflection will change. So while in English we have table for singular and tables for plural, 3 tables, 2 tables, 25 tables. In Russian, you have tables, let's imagine that is Russian, tables. If it were 2 tables, tabli, for example, and more than 2 tables. Me estoy por unir por el otro lado, chicos. Salgo de acá. ¿Me ven? ¿Me escuchan?
Yes.
Sí, pero
Yes.
yes, we can.
Ay, qué loquero que es esto. Disculpen, chicos. Disculpen los problemas de conexión. No, no fue de conexión, fue de luz. Se corta la luz, no sé por qué. Bueno, ok. Les estaba explicando el porqué de esta lista de características que da Pinker. So Pinker, what he wants to show is that languages not only differ as regards syntax, they differ as regards many other features. So languages, in the case of English, we are comparing and contrasting English and Spanish. So he defines English as an isolating language, as opposed to, which is the other option, the language can be isolating or isolate. Vamos rápido que son las -10. Isolating or
Highly inflected.
yeah, inflected. Highly inflected if it is very much inflected. But the two options are isolating or highly inflected. Isolating language means that it has no suffixes, no inflections. Inflections could be, as we were saying, inflections for nouns, inflections for verbs. So in the case of verbs, the morphology, the inflections could, which are the options we have, which is that you expect as native speakers of a human language, not only of Spanish, of a human language, you expect a verb to be inflected to show what? Number?
Maybe to show number or the tense.
To show number.
The tense, if it's for a singular or plural agreement.
Agreement is the same as number. So to show number, to show tense. And then depending on the language, if the language is highly inflected, like Spanish, the inflections will show more categories, more grammatical categories. So in English, verbal inflections show tense, only one tense, past tense, only one, and two, if you want, third person singular, and that's it. While in Spanish, we show past tense, future tense, present tense, and even aspect. Our verbs, but aspect only in the past, when they are in their past forms. El pretérito imperfecto y el pretérito perfecto. Pretérito significa pasado. Perfecto e imperfecto se refiere al aspecto. Jugaba o jugó. So that is, Karen, a minute ago, she was saying highly inflected. Well, Spanish is a highly inflected language. English, and as you can see, why is it that Pinker repeats, goes back to the 6 features? Because in the first place here, he holds that English is an isolating language. But what is it that he says later on? What is it that he says later on in number 1? Does he still hold that English is an isolating language?
No, that share characteristics with the other languages.
So that it's also inflected, as I have just showed you. It is inflected, for example, verbs can be inflected, but there are fewer inflections. Nouns, as you have shown me, in general, they are neutral, let's say, but there are very few, especially when they refer to human beings, or not human beings, living beings, that take on the suffix s for female, lion, lioness. So it's not completely true. We cannot classify English as an isolated language alone. It's mainly isolating because it has very few inflections, but it's also inflected. Then he mentions that English is a fixed, in the first part, English is a fixed word order language. And it's true in the sense that because English is not inflected or highly inflected, syntax is very important. So for you, the position of the word will decide whether the word is the direct object or the indirect object, right? Now, while in English we say, she gave him a kiss, she gave Tom a kiss. Tom is the, no, les voy a usar otro ejemplo para que vean bien la diferencia. He gave Tom, bueno, lo dejemos así después bien. He gave Tom a kiss. We know Tom is the indirect object because of the position. And we know a kiss is the direct object because of the position. But in Spanish, it's not the same. We need prepositional phrases. No podemos decir, dio, si lo traducimos literal, dio Tom un beso. Dio Tomás un beso. ¿Qué es dio Tomás un beso? Quiere decir que Tomás dio un beso y yo decido cambiar el orden y hacer un orden marcado. ¿Sí? ¿Ven la diferencia? ¿Ven a qué se refiere fixed word order? Y el hecho de que sea an isolating language en muchos casos. Es el orden el que te va a dar la función. Eso es lo que ustedes veían en primer año, cuando nosotros les hacíamos hacer, a ver, ¿se puede cambiar el orden o no? Por las características de inglés. En español, no podés cambiar el orden libremente. Necesitas, por lo general, una preposición, algo que lo haga gramatical. Pero, ¿qué dice luego Pinker más tarde? Vuelve nuevamente al punto 2 y dice, English, like free word order languages, has free ordering in strings of prepositional phrases, where each preposition marks the semantic role of its noun phrase as if it were a case marker. This is similar to Spanish. So you can either say the package was sent from Chicago to Boston by Mary, or the package was sent by Mary to Boston from Chicago. So the use of prepositions will make it clear what kind of syntactic function the element has. And so English is not totally fixed word order. It could be sometimes free word ordered language, right? Well, then he speaks about the difference between accusative and ergative languages. Esto es un poco difícil de entender y estoy con poco tiempo, no tengo problema después en explicarlo, pero prefiero no detenerme en esta diferencia porque no es muy pertinente para nosotros. Vayamos a la número 4. English is a subject prominent language. He speaks about subject prominent instead of what? What is the label we have taught you and we usually use instead of subject prominent? What do we say about the typology of English?
Non-pro-drop.
Yeah, we say it's a non-pro-drop language. We can also speak about null, N-U-L-L, null subject languages. We can say that Spanish is a null subject language because it allows the omission or the non-existence of a subject. So this is different terminology. Remember, we spoke about the glossary. So null subject is language is the same as pro-drop language. And subject prominent language is the same as non-pro-drop language. So here it says, English is a subject prominent language in which all sentences must have a subject, even if there is nothing for the subject to refer to, that is to say, if it is non-referential, as in it's raining or there's a unicorn in the garden. Then it speaks about topic prominent languages like Japanese. So in Japanese, as it says here, the sentences will always begin with the topic, that is to say, with what you are speaking about. Ustedes vieron algo de tópico, tema, rema, tópico, vieron algo el año pasado. Well, since neither English nor Spanish are topic prominent, we are not going to pay much attention to it. But again, if we go to number 4, it says English like, well, it says, it speaks about topic prominent languages, and it says that sometimes has a topic constituent. And this is what you studied last year in you saw the marked themes. Ustedes el año pasado veían los temas marcados, ¿o no? En gramática 2, marked themes. ¿Estudiaban eso?
Yes.
Claro. Is when, instead of, which would be the unmarked theme? Which is the unmarked? Unmarked means the usual one. The canonical subject, verb. But if you decide to have object verb because you want to make emphasis or on something or the adverbial at the beginning, then you say it's topic prominent. That is not impossible in English. And there's something else that is not impossible in English, and I want to make a point now. I'm going to take advantage of this moment. Remember, I have shared last class, I uploaded like a summary of the most important concepts. And there's something I think I included, and I wanted you to pay attention to, that is in the chapter of Universal Grammar and the Learning and Teaching of Second Languages, on page 28 of the article. Is it 20? No, it's later on. Not 28, 32. Vivian Cook says, when he gives examples, Vivian is a man, that's why I say he. It's snowing or there's a fly in my soup. He says, such subjects, so they are empty subjects, grammatical subjects, dummy subjects, all for the glossary. Such dummy subjects are the giveaway. Do you understand the meaning of giveaway as a noun? Are the giveaway that English is a non-pro-drop language, as they are not found in pro-drop languages. This is vital. Why? Because many a time in English, you will find sentences with no subject, especially in informal English, conversational English. So you meet someone, a friend on the street, coming out from, I don't know, a movie theater, and you say, been to the movies? Been to the movies, and not have you been to the movies. So eat well instead of have you eaten well. Have you ever heard examples of the sort in informal English? When you watch series or the lyrics of songs, sometimes it's not very frequent, but sometimes there's omission of the subject pronoun. Now, there's never omission of a grammatical subject. You will not hear like is, something like is raining, because it's informal. They would not say is raining, it's raining, or whatever. So that's why Cook points out that dummy subjects are the giveaway, son la clave, the clue that English is non-pro-drop, because they are not only are they always present, let's say, but they are non-existent in other languages. They are non-existent in Spanish, for example, or Italian, right? So this is like, it's in the key of, or in the essence of the typology, okay? But as from subject prominent languages, while in Japanese, you must always start with the theme you are talking about, always. That's not the case in Spanish or in English, but sometimes in Spanish and in English, you may alter the word order. Then he speaks about the typical word order of languages. He speaks about Greenberg, a linguist who decided to study language universals. Remember, we spoke about language universals, which is not the same as language principles, or exactly the same. And for example, he decided to study the organization of constituents, and he found 45 possible combinations. Both English and Spanish have the following canonical order: subject, verb, object, or subject, verb, if the verb is intransitive. But in German and in Japanese is subject, object, verb. That's the canonical word order. But when he revises or re-examines these features, he says in number 5, like subject of object languages, not too long ago, English availed itself of a subject object verb order, which is still interpretable in archaic expressions like till death do us part, when you get married, hasta que la muerte los separe, instead of saying till death parts you away or something like that, till death do us part. Or with this ring I thee wed, I wed you. Thee is an old pronoun. Okay? So, to cut a long story short, what is it that Pinker wanted to show us by describing these 6 features which are repeated and which characterize certain groups of languages and not certain others? What was his objective by revising them? What do you think? Digan algo, aunque les parezca que esté mal, digan algo, no se queden mudos porque así no se aprende nada. No importa si se equivocan. ¿Qué les parece? ¿Que para qué hizo eso, esa revisión?
I think it was to show that most languages derive from a common language, common ancestor language, could be, because they share this.
Yeah, well, yeah, in a way it is connected to that, which is what he speaks about in the second part of the article, where he focuses on which approach to language, which type of linguistics, comparative linguistics or contrastive linguistics. In the second part of the article, when he speaks about languages deriving from a proto-language, and developing. What?
Comparative, I think.
Comparative, not contrastive, because it has to do with the evolution of languages, the history of languages, their genetic relatedness. That is to say, English is similar to French and to Italian. Sorry, Spanish is similar to French and to Italian, English to German, and so on and so forth. While contrastive linguistics, and remember this was a question you had to answer for today, the main object of contrastive linguistics is what? What is the main object of study of contrastive linguistics, not comparative linguistics? Which is what we do. What is the main object of study?
To compare and contrast two languages, the learner's native language, the first language,
yeah,
and the target language.
Okay, two languages in contact. In contact where? If you are speaking about language interference, where are they in contact, these two languages? You study English and Spanish, don't you? You're studying that now.
Yes.
So where are those two languages? In your body, where are they?
In our brain?
In your brains. In your brains, you were born with this built-in grammar. You were born with the syntax of which of the two languages? English or Spanish? Spanish.
Okay, so it is because
questions in English. Why is it that it is so difficult for Spanish speakers to make questions in English? Because in English, we have, because of the structure dependency principle, in English, we know we have to move a constituent to make a question. And in general, what we move is an auxiliary verb, which is non-existent in that way in Spanish. So in Spanish, the only thing we do is very similar to what they do in Japanese. If you read Universal Grammar and the Teaching and Learning of Second Languages, Cook tells us that...
Profe, se te silencia el micrófono.
¿Hasta dónde me escucharon? ¿Me
Hasta
escucharon?
Cook.
Until Cook.
Cook speaks about Japanese and how to make questions in Japanese, y eso es lo que estoy tratando de encontrar donde da el ejemplo. Let me see. I think it's here. Page 30 of the original article under the heading, The Universal Grammar Model of Language Acquisition. In the second paragraph, it says, naturally, the precise way in which principles apply depends upon the particular language involved. Japanese, for example, does not form questions by movement, like in the structure dependency principle, but uses questions markers within the sentence, question markers. So the word order is the same, and then they add a word that is ka. Y dice, kimi waka no yo minahoshito ka. Ka, cuando se incluye esa palabra, ese signo, implica que hay una pregunta. Pero no hay un cambio de orden. Es como decir algo, es como decir, mi papá es médico psiquiatra, o tu papá es médico psiquiatra, K. Entonces te estoy preguntando. En realidad, si yo digo, tu papá es médico psiquiatra, es una oración afirmativa. O es médico, tu papá es médico, es una oración afirmativa. En español pasa algo parecido al japonés, porque nosotros en español decimos, tu papá es médico. Podemos llegar a dar vuelta y decir, es tu papá médico, pero muchas veces decimos, tu papá es médico. O decimos, tu mamá vino tarde. Afirmativo. ¿Tu mamá vino tarde? Sí. Y la pregunta se hace simplemente con la entonación. En inglés eso es imposible, o si alguna vez pasa, no es lo frecuente. Entonces, es debido a eso que nosotros, al tener las dos lenguas en contacto en nuestro cerebro, hay errores de interferencia. Entonces, cuando uno enseña un idioma, lo primero que se tiene que fijar es qué idioma hablan sus alumnos, porque depende del idioma que hablen sus alumnos, es el problema que van a tener. Entonces, hacer preguntas en inglés les cuesta mucho a los hispanohablantes porque no tenemos ese parámetro, digamos, no es que no tenemos el parámetro, el principio de que, because of the principle of structure dependency, that we expect movement of one constituent to the front does not apply in Spanish or does not apply all the time as it does in English. So we make that interference. Another problem is that our verbs are highly inflected. Tantas inflexiones tenemos, siempre cuento, mientras que en inglés hay 3 inflexiones, 3, y en el verbo to be 5, y nada más. En inglés, en español, un verbo se puede transformar hasta más de 30 veces en una palabra distinta. O sea, mientras en inglés tenemos go, went, gone no es conjugado, tenemos go, went y goes. Si es irregular, cats, las únicas 2 formas, el to be, am, is, are, were, was, ahí tenemos un poquito más. En español tenemos tantas formas, por ejemplo, ir, una letra I con una R, ir, se transforma en voy, B corta, o, imagínense para un extranjero una palabra de nada que ver, ir, voy, fui, con F, iban, con B larga y no B corta, bueno, miles de palabras. ¿Qué hace? ¿Qué consecuencia tiene esto? Y qué es lo que estudiamos en Contrastive Grammar, because the languages are in contact in our brains. We want to add suffixes to the verbs in English. Y por eso los estudiantes hispanos, cuando están aprendiendo los condicionales y usan el second conditional would, le meten pasado al verbo que sigue y no infinitivo. ¿Por qué? Porque lo quieren conjugar. Lo queremos conjugar porque eso es lo que tenemos ya engraved in our brains. So, contrastive grammar deals with languages in contact, but in contact in your brains. ¿Eso está claro?
Yes.
¿Sí?
Yes.
Bueno,
Yes.
no sé si está Monse, ya llegó o no. O si no, Sofi, al final pudieron
Sí,
hacer el
estoy
documento.
acá.
Ah, hola Monse, ¿cómo andas?
¿Cómo va?
El documento con el true and false.
Acá lo tengo, acá les comparto pantalla.
Bueno, le demos una mirada rápido por la cortada de luz. Bueno, ¿van entendiendo un poco más de qué se trata la materia? ¿Para dónde rumbeamos hablando mal y pronto? ¿O no? ¿O siguen medio perdidos? No contestan nada, no saben, no contestan, o sea que no entienden nada.
More or less.
¿Cómo?
De a poco. More or less, yes.
Pero más que la primera clase, ¿o no?
Sí, definitivamente.
Pero ustedes no leen, ¿eh? Leer, yo me equivoco cuando digo lean, tienen que estudiar. Tienen que leerlo muchas veces, ¿sí? Ah, me olvidé de decirles, if you want, this we did last year, you can give a name to your group, a grammatical name, so that you learn words from the glossary. So you could be universal grammar, you could be canonical, you could be whatever you want, okay? You can be an inflection, whatever, or whatever name you want to, okay? Well, good. A ver, no las veo ahora, las preguntas se me fueron. Aquí está. According to Cook, universal grammar is concerned with core and peripheral areas of language knowledge. Is this true or false? Seguro que ya tienen las respuestas, pero díganme cuál es la respuesta y por qué. Concerned with core and peripheral areas of knowledge. True or false? False. Why? It's only concerned with which of the two? With core grammar, with core knowledge, or with peripheral knowledge? Este es el tipo de preguntas que van a tener en el parcial en la primera parte, chicos. Si no las pasan, no corregimos la otra. Así que activen.
With the core.
But why?
In page 29,
On
says
page.
that
Yes.
it says that grammar in the principles and parameters theory is concerned with fundamental aspects of language knowledge. Those aspects
So which would
that
be
are building up to the mind.
which would be the synonym of fundamental in this prompt?
Core.
Which is the core, like the core of an apple. You know, the core of an apple is the central part of the apple. You eat all the apple and you leave the core, but then you speak of the core of a problem. Peripheral areas are, for example, whether they are inflected or not, whether, for example, you express movement in a satellite or not, whether you have phrasal verbs or not. That is peripheral, okay? It's not core, it's not central. It's not, I mean, you need a subject, you need to retain the subject pronoun or not. Then according to Vivian Cook, parameters are built in the mind, so there is no need for their values to be set. This is, rápido, alguno largue la respuesta.
False.
True or false? False, okay. Why? What part of the sentence is not accurate?
The part that says, so there is no need for the values to be set.
Excellent. We always have to set the values.
Yes.
So, you speak Spanish, you don't retain the subject, but when you speak English, you have to retain the subject pronoun. Por eso las profes los viven corrigiendo cuando uno se olvida el he, el she, o el it, okay? You have to set the parameter, the device, tienen que correr la palanquita para el lado de, tengo las dos, bueno, voy a poner la palanquita para el lado de retention of the pronoun. But are parameters built in the minds, or only principles are built in the minds?
Only principles?
Both, because principle and parameters exist together. They are like the sign of Saussure. Ustedes lo estudiaron a Saussure, ¿o no? ¿Se acuerdan de la dicotomía del signo y el significado y el significante? Que es una sola cosa en realidad. So, principles and parameters exist together. Next. After reading chapter 4 in The Language Instinct by Pinker, we can conclude that the dishonest door has just died happily. Is an instance of an ungrammatical English sentence due to the wrong combination of words. Rocío, Constanza, algo. Can you answer, please? Rocío?
Yes, I'm here.
Hello, Rocío. True or false? Is the dishonest door has just died happily an instance of an ungrammatical sentence? English sentence.
Give me a minute.
De tu respuesta va a depender si expliqué bien y si vos leíste suficiente o no.
Yes, I read it, but I am trying to find.
And from what I said in class, I have repeated this like 25 times. No me frustren, por favor.
It is false.
Let's say it's an instance of false. So the sentence is
Grammatical. Yes.
Excellent. The sentence is nonsensical, ridiculous, but it is grammatical. Why? Can you explain why it is grammatical?
Because
Perfect.
there is a subject that is correct. The verb is also well in a correct tense, and the complement as well.
Yes, the constituents are in their usual position. The
Yes.
subject, which is the subject?
The dishonest door.
Yeah, and the head of the subject?
Door.
Door, and door is a noun. So what you have is a determiner, a modifier, which is an adjective, a noun,
Yes.
which is the head of the subject. Then you have the predicate, you have the head of the predicate, which is has died. You have just the adverbial, and then you have an adverbial of manner.
Yes.
Excellent. And that is grammatical. Muy bien. Nadie sabe la respuesta illustrates a case of subject pronoun retention. True or false? A ver, Macarena.
Verdadero. Ah, perdón.
Mercedes. Excellent. True. Why? Why is it a case of subject?
Because there is a subject, which is nadie in this case.
No, no te estoy preguntando si hay sujeto. Te estoy preguntando if it is a case of subject pronoun retention. Está conectado, pero no es exactamente lo mismo. Why is it a case of subject pronoun retention? Because there is a subject, pero te falta algo más.
Because it is a pronoun in this case.
Which, como in this case?
Nadie.
Which is a pronoun? In this case, and in which case isn't it a pronoun?
Maybe we say something like, Mari sabe la respuesta.
Mari o nadie. ¿Qué dijiste?
Sorry, what is the question? Me estoy confundiendo.
The question is, why, vos dijiste, nadie is a pronoun in this case. ¿Qué quisiste decir con in this case? Siempre es un pronoun, eso es la pregunta.
Ah,
o sea,
sí, perdón, me refería a este
es un
ejemplo.
pronoun.
En esta oración.
Ah, pero es siempre, no tenés que decir in this case, because nadie is an indefinite pronoun. Okay?
Sí, 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 ya entendí, gracias.
The sentence, the shop, which is on Petticoat Lane, which is near the Gherkin, which is in London's primary financial district, which blah, blah, illustrates the property of natural languages that allows us to rearrange words and grammatical units to form sentences of potentially infinite complexity, the property of natural and artificial languages alike, which allows us to rearrange word and grammatical units to form sentences of potentially infinite, the notion of the sheer vastness of language, the notions of the sheer vastness of language and universal grammar.
I think it's A.
Excellent. It is A. Why not B?
Because it says the property of natural and artificial languages. I think artificial languages are not.
Are not. Remember the word chain device. Why not the notion of the sheer vastness of language that has to do with this capacity of producing an infinite number of sentences? No, eso no es un ejemplo de eso, and it's not an example of what universal grammar is. Excellent. The sentence is, la niña lee sobre el antropomorfismo, un bocho la niña, and the girl reads about anthropomorphism, evidence that Spanish and English show features of the following language types. Remember the 6 language types people was describing? Well, it's this. That both are or show features of isolating, inflecting, and agglutinating languages, features of agglutinating languages, no expliqué agglutinating, and features of, me falta, isolating and inflecting languages, and none of the options. Catherine, o Catherine, no sé cómo se pronuncia.
Yes, Catherine.
Catherine, what do you think? Y todos los demás vayan pensando. René, se prepara, René. Sindel.
Maybe isolating and inflecting languages?
Letter.
C?
No, it's not the best in this case.
Okay.
It's not wrong, but it's not the best among all of them.
And maybe letter A, because it says inflecting and isolating, but the agglutinating languages is the one that...
As well. Which word gives you an example of agglutinative languages? So, isolating, for example, la palabra niña, el sustantivo niña, en posición de sujeto, and girl en posición de sujeto, si lo cambiáramos a posición de objeto, tanto en español como en inglés, no cambiaría la palabra. Eso quiere decir isolating. Por ejemplo, vi a la niña. Bañé a la niña. I watched the girl. I saw the girl. En latín, si alguno sabe latín, o si saben alemán, en alemán es más que nada con los pronombres pasa, pero en latín, y lo dice Randolph Quirk en el artículo con Stein, por ejemplo, usa la palabra can, que significa perro. Entonces, depende de si perro es el sujeto de la oración, el objeto o el objeto indirecto, va a estar en caso dativo. Por ejemplo, si es el sujeto, está en caso nominativo. Entonces dice, qué sé yo, el perro ladra, no me acuerdo cómo dice ahí, no sé latín, pero como si fuera can ladra. Si es dale un hueso al perro, ya no puedes decir can, tenés que decir cani, lo tenés que declinar porque es objeto indirecto, dativo. Y si decís maté al perro, tenés que decir canem, y no podés decir can porque es objeto directo. Eso quiere decir cuando son totalmente flexivas las lenguas. Pero si son isolating, acá tenemos una característica de isolating languages. El sustantivo no se declina. Tiene la misma forma, tanto cuando funciona como sujeto, como objeto. Lo de, bueno, inflecting, because of the conjugation of reads, for example, lee o la en español, la inflexión para género. Y después, agglutinating is when you add more than one suffix to one word. Alemán es una lengua aglutinante, han visto que son esas palabras que son un choclo eterno, pero es una palabra, se la ve como una palabra, pero son más de una. Y no solo alemán es aglutinante, si Monse o Sophie pueden escribir en el chat, escriban dáselo. Pueden escribir dáselo en el chat.
Perdón, tengo una duda.
Sí, Sophie.
Se me confunde un poco esto de inflecting con agglutinating, porque yo por lo general...
Ahí te lo explico porque están relacionados, pero no exactamente.
Los relacionaba, claro, pensaba el tema de agglutinating por el caso del alemán, porque sé que declina mucho, pero
no
pero
sé por qué lo aglutinativo no es que declina, sino que junta en una misma palabra varias inflexiones y no una sola.
Ok, o sea que inflecting sería de una sola inflexión, por ejemplo.
Claro.
Okay.
Por eso las lenguas aglutinantes son inflexivas, son flexivas, obviamente, pero no todas las flexivas son aglutinantes. ¿Alguien escribió dáselo en el chat que no veo?
Sí, ahí está.
Bueno, si ustedes miran la palabra dáselo, nosotros hablamos español, es una pavada de fácil, pero alguien que no hablara, una persona que habla inglés y no habla español, esto es dificilísimo para alguien que habla inglés, ¿o no? Aprender esto. Porque esa palabra que se ve como una, no es una. ¿Cuántas son? 3. A ver, lo digamos en inglés. ¿Cómo traducen dáselo? Encima tenemos la omisión del subject pronoun. Pero bueno, como es imperativo, puede ser. Give it to him. ¿Ven? Miren. Give it to him or her. ¿Sí? Fíjense, eso es un ejemplo de lengua aglutinante en español. ¿Lo ves, la chica que estaba en duda? ¿Ves la diferencia?
Sí, profe, gracias.
¿Ves? Bueno, en inglés no tenemos casos así, pero también tenemos, como pasa en español, que lo han visto mucho en lengua, también en gramática, cuando hacen word building, word formation. Entonces, ¿cómo se va agregando? For example, a ver qué podría ser. Déjenme pensar uno que esté bueno para... bueno, madness. Quiero pensar uno. Beauty, from beauty, beautiful, and beautifully dressed. Beautifully is an example of agglutinating, como acá antropomorfismo, ¿sí? Bueno, y la última, que ya es retarde, in Gerald was not bright but truly hardworking. Gerald, en esta oración, Gerald was not bright but truly hardworking. It was the secret of his success in life. It is a case of subject pronoun retention in the second sentence. It's a case of empty it with no reference. It's an object pronoun with an aphoric reference to Gerald being hardworking. It's an expletive with an aphoric reference to Gerald being hardworking. Sí, Jacqueline, colorless también da ese ejemplo. Colorlessly sería mejor, con dos sufijos. Colorlessly. Bueno, number 7, which is the answer?
Option C.
It's an object pronoun with an aphoric reference to Gerald being hardworking. What do the rest of the class think?
I think that it is a subject pronoun, so that's why I...
You think it's letter A?
Yes, I think
A.
that it is, yes, A.
And who thought it was letter C?
Yo. Pero
And
no,
Sophie
ahora veo
thought it
bien.
was letter C. What would be the problem with letter C? It's partly true, but there's something that makes it false. There's a trick.
Yes, because it says it is an object pronoun, but it is not
The
an
trick
object
is there.
pronoun.
It's not an object pronoun. It's a subject pronoun. And this subject pronoun has an aphoric reference to Gerald. Yes, it's true, porque se refiere a eso. Gerald was not bright, but truly hardworking. It was the secret. Eso and this, his being bright, his being truly hardworking was the secret of his success in life. So letter C is not true because it says object pronoun. If it said it's a pronoun with an aphoric reference or it's a subject pronoun, it would be okay. Yes, it's letter A. It's a case of subject pronoun retention. It's not an empty it because it does have reference, an aphoric reference. Well, chicos, escuchen. Sophie, ¿podés pegar lo de Chomsky en el chat? Me acaban de mandar no es una invitación, porque no es para todo el mundo, pero hoy Chomsky va a dar, vieron que está muy viejito, pero sigue vivo y es lindo aprovechar y escucharlo, aunque es como difícil seguirlo, pero ustedes ahora ya están en mejor posición para seguirlo. A partir de las 5 de la tarde hay una presentación que va a dar él desde Estados Unidos y es, bueno, de asistencia libre, o sea que pueden sumarse. No sé, Sofi, si la podés poner si Sofi todavía está en la llamada.
Ahí no encontré el link, ahí lo pegué.
Ahí está, Sofi. ¿Cómo era? Es a las 5 de la tarde, 7 p.m. de Estados Unidos, 5 de la tarde acá.
Sí, haciendo el cálculo, sí, porque dice que es a las 7 de Iowa y busqué y hay 2 horas de diferencia, así que serían las 5.
Bueno, perfecto. Si quieren unirse, aprovechen porque tiene más de 90 años y es un genio viviente.
O las 9. Ahora me doy cuenta que no sé si son 2 horas. No, creo que son las 9 de acá. Si son las
o es 1 hora.
No,
Sé que
profe,
son 2 horas, pero no me acuerdo.
ahora en Iowa son las 11:35. Así que son 2 horas antes. Si es a las 7
está bien.
en
Entonces
Iowa.
a las 5 de la tarde. Él habla mucho de ahora de sociología, de política, pero siempre lo agarran con la teoría de los principios de parámetros y la gramática universal. Así que sería lindo si se unen y lo escuchan un ratito, ¿sí? Ojalá no se me corte la luz a mí. Okay. See you next class. Please study all the things we told you to study. Laura will upload. She was in charge of the presentations on predicates and arguments, and there are also some mistakes she made last year when she was recording that. So we are going to upload the erratum, la fe de rata, ¿saben? Disculpen, pero da mucho trabajo y es bastante estresante grabar las clases, así que estamos poniendo las clases del año pasado y cuando notamos algo que no está bien o no está muy preciso, les avisamos cuál es el error o lo que no está claro. Is that clear?
Yes.
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 Okay, bye.
Bye. Thank